The road to the farm near Ravenstonedale lost its meaning after leaving the town of Kirkby Stephen. On maps it appeared as a thin line, but in reality it was a mud-soaked track, too narrow for two vehicles to pass side by side. Dark larch trees rose on both sides, nearly sealing off the sky. Even though it was midday, the light was dull, as if the sun had chosen not to come here. My name is Daniel H. Carter. I was an archive clerk at the regional courthouse. Field work was not part of my job, but the Ravenstonedale case had been marked unusual. One sentence repeated itself throughout the reports. Everyone living on the farm had died. Everyone. The farm's iron gate was open. It wasn't broken or forced. In the mud in front of it were footprints. No tire tracks, only boot prints. Same tread, same size. And they weren't one-directional. Forward, back, forward again. The kind of tracks that suggested someone had wandered around the same area for days. The house was an old two-story structure. Its paint was peeling, and parts of the porch railing had rotted away. When I stepped inside, I didn't smell what I expected. Not death, not decay. It was more like the air of a place sealed shut for too long, stagnant, heavy, unsettling. Photographs hung on the walls. Thomas Walker, his wife Margaret Walker, their children William Walker and Emily Walker, and an elderly woman, Thomas's mother, Elizabeth Walker. They were smiling in the pictures. Harvest time photos, poses in front of the barn, the children with mud-caked shoes. There was no sign of unease in any of them, no haste. The bodies had been found in the barn. When we opened the barn doors, the conversations stopped. The animals were dead, too, all of them. The doors had been locked. There were no signs of escape. The veterinarian shook his head. This isn't a disease. There are no symptoms. The autopsy reports were even more disturbing. No poison, no trauma, no signs of suffocation. Every one of them had suffered cardiac arrest on the same day, but whether it happened simultaneously or one after another, no one could say. Something in the kitchen caught my attention. A plate sat on the table. On it were moldy breadcrumbs and a half-eaten apple. The cut surface of the apple had darkened. It had been eaten at least a few days earlier. But the Walker family had been dead for at least a week. The footprints weren't only in the yard. From the barn to the house, from the house to the back field, then back to the barn again. Always the same boots, always the same weight. They suggested that someone had stayed here after the deaths. When I asked about it in Kirkby Stephen, people chose silence. Only one man answered me, an old man named Harold Finch. He was standing at the crossroads, as if he had been waiting for me. "This place doesn't stay empty," he said. "Who's left?" I asked. "This place belongs to something," he replied. "Not to people. No one was supposed to stay at the farm that night." But I did inside my car, headlights pointed toward the house. As the fog settled, the house grew fainter. Just as I was drifting off, a light came on in an upstairs room, very briefly. Then it went out. There was a shadow in front of the door. Tall, sloped shoulders, completely still. By morning, the shadow was gone. But in the center of the yard, written into the mud with a finger, was a sentence. The letters were uneven, as if they'd been scratched in haste. I never left. The farm hadn't been abandoned. It had simply changed hands. I never left. As the sun rose, the writing didn't fade. On the contrary, as the mud dried, the letters seemed to sink deeper. Harold Finch studied it for a long time, then scraped the ground with his cane. "The soil accepted it," he said. "Wiping it away won't be enough. The authorities documented it, photographed it, but no one commented out loud. We all felt that the sentence wasn't a threat, it was a statement. No one was hiding here. It was present. The tracks appeared again, different from before, fresher. From the barn to the house, from the house to the kitchen, then back to the barn, but this time there were pauses, as if someone had sat down and waited. There were mud stains on the chair beneath the kitchen table, marks that suggested someone had sat there for a long time. The house had been sealed, yet when we entered, it was tidier. The curtains had been pulled back. Dust had been wiped from certain surfaces. There were fresh ashes in the stove. They weren't fully cold yet. "That's impossible," the sheriff said. No one came in. Upstairs, the door to the children's room was open. Shapes had been drawn on the floor in chalk circles, broken lines, repeating symbols. They looked like children's drawings, but far too deliberate. In the corner of the wall was a sentence, written in small letters, shaky but resolute. "They left me." That was when I understood. This wasn't a place. It was a habit. The Walker family hadn't merely lived here, they had fed it, with their voices, their footsteps, their routines. When they were gone, the farm had been left hungry. That night I stayed alone. Officially I wasn't allowed to, but leaving felt more wrong. Not in the car, inside the house. I sat in the middle of the living room. Hours passed. Late into the night, the house began to make sounds. Not the creaking of wood expanding. These were footsteps, steady, heavy, deliberate. The barn door creaked open. I saw the silhouette at the threshold. It was tall, sloped shoulders. It had no face, yet its presence was unmistakable. It wore boots caked with mud, the same boots that had made the tracks. "You can't stay here," I said. "I'm not staying," it replied. Its voice wasn't a single-voice man, woman, child, overlapping whispers. "I'm here." "They're dead," I said. "They left," it corrected me. I stayed. It took a step forward. The inside of the barn darkened. I didn't retreat. Strangely, the fear came late. "This place belongs to people," I said. The silhouette bent slightly. "People are temporary." I closed my eyes. When I opened them, the barn was empty. Only the tracks remained. But this time they didn't go in every direction. They all led toward the house. By morning, the file was closed. Unsolved case. I requested a transfer. I left Kirkby Stephen, far away, to the city. But some places don't let go of you. Last week there was mud in front of my new apartment door. Boot prints, same tread, same weight. On the threshold, written with a finger, was a single sentence. "You fed me." I had never left Ravenstonedale. Only my address had changed. My name is Elias Moreland. I am 38 years old, and because of my profession, I enter dead houses. Sometimes these houses are merely abandoned. Other times they leave something behind, something that seeps into the walls. Documents, title deeds, inheritance disputes. Official reasons are always orderly. The real reasons are never written down. When the Blackridge farm file landed on my desk, The calendar showed the final days of 1926. 4 years had passed since the incident. On the cover of the file, there was only a single sentence. Deaths that occurred on the property could not be clarified. On maps, Blackridge looked like a point drawn almost reluctantly. The road heading north from the town of Crona lost its name after a while, turning into a narrow, silent path, drowned in mud. The trees rising on both sides formed a wall that swallowed even the wind. When I stopped the car, the engine noise died, but the silence did not arrive. It was already there before me. The farmhouse seemed buried within the forest. The main house and the barn were attached to one another. The stone walls were darkened in places. The windows were either broken or boarded up from the inside. As I approached the door, I noticed something. There was no lock, as if locking it had never been necessary. Inside, the air was heavy, not dusty, more like a breath that had gone unused for a very long time. The order of the house was striking. It wasn't messy. Things had been left unfinished, but not in haste. On the table sat a loaf of bread, cut in half. There was no knife beside it. According to the file, the Keller family had lived here. Johann Keller, in his early 60s, owner of the farm. His wife, Margarete. Their widowed daughter, Elise. Elise's 2 children, Clara, 8, and Samuel, 3. And the maid, Anna Weiss, who had started working only a day before the incident. 6 people, all dead on the same night. When I stepped into the barn, the wooden floorboards were still dark. They had been cleaned, but the stains remained. Something had happened here, not quickly, and certainly not loudly. The animal stalls were empty, yet the hay was still neatly arranged, as if someone had spent time here even after everything was over. The strangest detail wasn't in the file. It came from the village. There was an elderly baker in Kronau, Otto Heller. When he spoke to me, he lowered his voice, even though the shop was empty. After they died, he said, the farm wasn't empty. When I asked what he meant, he avoided my eyes. We saw smoke from the chimney. For 2 nights, according to the official records, the bodies had been found 4 days after the incident. But during those 4 days, someone had lit the stove. The animals had been fed. Meat had been taken from the cellar. And most importantly, no one had come down to the village. I stayed at the farm that night. It was illogical, but necessary. The truth sometimes speaks only in the dark. Around midnight, a sound came from the upper floor of the house. It wasn't a footstep. It was more like a shifting weight. I looked toward the staircase leading to the attic. The file mentioned that months before the incident, a former maid had quit her job, claiming that noises were coming from above. I picked up my flashlight, but I didn't climb the stairs, because at that moment I realized something. The sound from the attic was not happening for the first time. The house was waiting for me. When morning came, Blackridge Farm looked the same. The walls were intact. The barn door still stood at that strange angle that blocked the wind, and no smoke rose from the chimney. Yet after the night, I felt that everything should have been different. What I realized was that it wasn't the house that had changed. It was me. The idea that a structure could preserve not only what had happened inside it, but also those who remained there, settled into my mind and refused to leave. I replayed the sound I'd heard that night over and over. It wasn't the wind. I knew how wind echoed in this part of the house. It wasn't an animal either. The sound had weight, it had rhythm, as if someone was shifting their place in a space that hadn't been used for a long time. And more unsettling than anything else, the sound had begun not when I entered the house, but when I settled into it. That detail disturbed me the most. I returned to Cronow and went deeper into the municipal archives. The official files were neat, sterile, and incomplete. But among the old documents, I found a notebook that seemed to belong to no one. It had belonged to Wilhelm Brandt, a gendarmerie deputy who retired shortly after the incident. The pages were irregular. Some notes were written hastily, others pressed hard into the paper, as if meant to be read again and again. One page, in particular, stood out. The paper was darkened by greasy fingerprints. Brandt described how the bodies had been found in the barn. The 4 were not stacked, but they were too close together, as if someone had not placed them randomly, but had tried to preserve a certain order. The youngest girl had hay clutched in her hands. Brandt emphasized this detail, noting that gripping the hay so tightly suggested the child had remained alive for some time after the attack. At the bottom of the page, written in pencil, there was a single sentence: someone was there. And then they stayed. That night I decided to return to Blackridge. It was irrational, but it felt like an obligation I couldn't avoid. A bond had formed between me and the house one I couldn't yet name. I deliberately lit the stove. The sound of the flames was unnaturally distinct in the silence of the night. This was the most disturbing detail in the files. After the murders, someone had continued to live here. Meals had been cooked, animals fed, fires lit. These were not things done in panic. As the night progressed, the house began to make its presence known more clearly. First came a faint scraping sound from the barn. Then, from the kitchen, a soft clink as plates very slowly touched one another. The sounds were not random. It was as if the house was remembering each room in turn, testing its memories one by one. The final sound came from the attic. This time I didn't hesitate. When I climbed the stairs, I saw that the attic door was open. No one was inside, but clear footprints marked the dust. Bare footprints and too large to belong to a child. They led down from the attic and disappeared into the house below. That was when I understood. This place didn't need someone to sneak in. Blackridge could hold on by itself. When I went down to the barn, I saw that the space where the 4 bodies had lain was still preserved. The bodies were gone, yet even their absence hadn't disturbed the order. The air was heavy. There was no smell of burning or decay. It was something harder to define, like the lingering trace of a place that had been lived in for a long time. The idea that a house might not expel those who died within it, but instead slowly draw them inward, began to solidify in my mind. That was when I heard a voice behind me, clear, calm, and unsettlingly close. "They don't leave," it said. I turned, but no one was there. The voice hadn't come from the walls or the empty space. It paused, then continued. "They stayed here. So did we." A cold shiver ran through me as I moved toward the barn door. It was closed. There was no lock, but it wouldn't open. From the darkness among the hay, a child's voice rose. It wasn't crying. It wasn't whispering. It sounded as if it were caught between sleep and wakefulness, repeating names. Johann, Margarethe, Alice, Anna. After the last name, it stopped. Then, after a brief silence, it spoke my name. I didn't run. because I knew now that this was no longer a matter of escape. What Blackridge did was not killing. The house was adapting to people, to footsteps, to breathing, to repeated routines. The Keller family hadn't left. They had become the memory of the house, and now that memory was weighing me. By morning, the barn door was open. The ashes in the stove were still warm. The farm was silent, but not empty. I returned to Cronau and closed the report. In the official records, I wrote only this: the property must be completely demolished. No trace should remain. 3 months later, Blackridge Farm was razed to the ground, and a small, meaningless stone was placed in its stead. Still, on some nights, those who pass along the forest road say they stop and listen. What they hear is not a footstep. It is a house, breathing as it remembers.